like I told you, like I walked out of my MCAT feeling like I literally bombed it. Like I thought that I was a 485.
Hunter, welcome back to the MCAT podcast. Hello, my crazy Blueprint MCAT instructor, tutor, all things extraordinaire.
All around, just swell individual. Hey man, how's it going?
All around good guy. What's going on? We're here
chilling, maxing, relaxing, all cool.
Yes, we're here for another episode of the MCAT podcast. Sometimes called the Show Tunes podcast. But yeah, let's hang out today.
I'm super down. Are we singing show tunes? What are we talking about?
No, we're not. We did that pre-game. So we're talking about the head game of the MCAT and how to get into the right headspace. I see questions all the time. Oh my gosh, my test is 2 weeks out. I'm freaking out. Oh my gosh, my kid's test is next week. The parents are freaking out. Let's talk about how to make sure that we're all kumbayaing at the right time to make sure that we're walking into our Pearson Testing Center with the best possible game plan, headspace, whatever, because that's a big part of this MCAT score.
Oh yeah. And it's not just a big part of it because like there's literally a psych-soc section, right? It's outside of that section too. There's a lot of psychology and other stuff that goes into the MCAT. And we're like thread and needle here, from space or something like that, because you want to be in the right headspace where it's like I'm motivated and I'm a proper amount of stress, right? Because you can't make a dime without a little bit of pressure. You need just a little bit of motivator, but like you don't want to be overwhelmed and freaking out and super anxious, especially like the closer you get to your actual test date, the more that kind of ramps up. And then like it can be this really bad feedback loop if like, maybe you get a practice test back and it's not super great, then you start panicking. And then because you're panicking, the next one's even worse. So like, it's a lot to juggle, especially when you get a lot closer to your actual test date, for sure.
Yeah. So what is the first thing to do? Let's say a student is kind of a month out from their test date and they're starting to feel that pressure. Maybe their full-length exams, assuming they're taking Blueprint MCAT full-length exams and switching over to AAMC right about now, a month out. Their full-length exams are maybe plateauing and they're starting to stress out and they're starting. I've been seeing the posts in Facebook right now. Should I push back? Should I not? What does that headspace look like a month out?
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna even do you one better, right? I'm gonna push it back even further than that. Like, forget one month out. Let's go 5 months out to the very beginning of someone's prep journey, right? Like, there's a lot of headspace that we need to get into as soon as we start prepping, just to understand like kind of what we're getting into for the next 4 to 6 months, right? And one of the things that I tell my students, it's this really interesting relationship that you need to have with getting things wrong, especially in the very beginning. Way back in the day, before I had gray hair, when I first, graduated from college, my first job was I wanted to do a gap year, and so I started working for a nonprofit science center, and I worked with kids, right? And I would teach these kids that the word fail was an acronym, FAIL. It was your first attempt in learning, right? And so like, be okay with falling on your face, be okay with getting things wrong. And that's like the first like headspace thing that I really encourage my tutoring students to get into as soon as we begin, because like, you're going to get a lot of things wrong over the next 6 months and it hurts, right? And if like we let it hurt us a lot every single time, then we're probably not going to be learning much from it because we're focused on, I got it wrong, instead of like, what can I, learn from this and how can I grow? And it's just going to suck. Like, our brains are really good at self-preservation. If something hurts over and over and over again, we kind of start to distance ourselves from it. We don't want to do it. And then it just makes prepping, and sitting down for 3 hours even harder. So that's honestly the first thing I tell my students is to kind of have this like pseudo masochistic relationship with like getting things wrong and be like, ouch, thank you, may I have another? And like, yay, I'm learning. So that's kind of the first thing that I'm going to tell my students.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you were saying that, I was like, I wonder if there could be like a setting on Blueprint MCAT's platform where students are taking these full-length exams where you can turn on a setting that's like, and I understand how this sounds, right? Like, don't hurt my feelings, right? Don't tell me the answers I got wrong and the answers I got right. Tell me the answers where I need to learn some more, and tell me the answers where I might need to learn some more, right?
Yeah. I'd be into it. It'd be a softer way to essentially get to the same goal, which is, it's this introspective. I missed something wrong. Why did I miss it wrong, et cetera? Or
Yeah.
why did I miss it? What am I doing wrong? How do I need to change the way that I think, et cetera? So, yeah, I 100% agree with you, because like sometimes, man, it just MCAT feels like it's beating us up, right? And we need to win every once in a while. So, yeah, that's the first thing. Get in the right headspace of like, we're gonna take some L's. That's okay, and it's part of the process, right? And we're gonna, over the course of like what we're talking about right now, getting into the headspace, the closer you get to test day, I'm gonna bring up this idea of like, it's part of the process, like several times, because it's a long process, and like I talk about, the timelines and the right way to prep and plan for it all the time. But when you're actually in it and you're going through it, and even if somebody who's done it 100 times, like yours truly, is sitting there going like, "Don't worry, this is how it's supposed to go."
Yeah.
Like you can still freak out, and it's still like it's not fun getting questions wrong. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Or
yeah.
getting questions where you need to learn some more.
Yeah. That's what it is. I didn't get it wrong. I just need to learn from this. Exactly.
Yeah. I like that rephrasing.
So yeah. See, and it's all about rephrasing. Right?
It's the lessons learned journal. It's all perspective. It's all perspective. All right, so that's 5 weeks out. What about
Yep.
4?
Oh, get out of
3?
here. 5 months out. 5 weeks out. It's a whole
five,
other set
5
of
months
work.
out. Yeah, 5 months out. Let's narrow down. Let's go to the next big phase.
So the next big phase after that, you're probably done some studying. You've started to take a couple full lengths, right? And usually like the first round of full lengths is where maybe some anxiety kicks in. I've done my diagnostic, and now I'm doing, full length 1, full length 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You might see some gains. You might plateau. And by the way, if you're plateauing, that's another thing that can just immediately cause anxiety. And this is really from like month 1-ish, because you don't want to take a full length right away. So month 1 all the way up to month 4 or 5, right? Depending on what your prep plan looks like. So if you're plateauing, that alone is enough to mess with some people's psychology and like psychological well-being, right? And our mental health, because it's like, oh no, what am I doing? Right? Like I'm stuck and now I'm in this rut and I can never get out of it. And like, what do I do? And you start kind of floundering, or worse, you just don't do anything different at all and you stay at your plateau, right? So that's what I would say is probably like the next big anxiety inducing phase, if you will, is the plateau. It happens to everyone at some point or another. You hit it and you're like, what the heck do I do from here?
Yeah. So what do you do?
Good question.
We're all going to hit it. How do we handle it? Is it just a matter of
I have no idea. You're on your own with that one.
Like I almost think of I don't know if you've heard, and I don't know, I think this is true, the buffalo versus a cow and what they do in thunderstorms when the storm's rolling through the prairies. The buffalo run into the storm because they know that running in the opposite direction into the storm will make the storm last less, right? They're gonna get through it, and the cow's like trying to plod away from it, and they're just stuck in it longer and longer. Is it like, does that elicit any sort of visuals for you?
Oh, plenty of visuals. Let me tell you what. Like, yeah, man, I'm like home on the range right now. You're speaking to my Southwest Arizona heart. But yeah. So I do kind of I appreciate where you're coming at with from this. Yeah. So when it comes to the plateau and like, the plains, if you will, the mesa where the buffalo roam, I always tell my students one big thing, because it's like a really big blow, especially if you're trying and you think you're improving, you think that you're studying, like, what the heck, I know my content better now than I did a month ago. Why is my score not improving, right? And it can just be super demoralizing, especially if it feels like I'm doing all this work for nothing, right? That just like sucks. So really what I tell my students when it comes to plateaus is like, it's not indicative that like your intelligence has capped. And I think that's the first thing that my students like really, I want them to understand, because that can play a huge role in like their mental health and stuff. Which
they're just like, this is my ceiling. Alone.
Yeah. And like, that's not the case at all. Right. Yeah. What I tell them, it's kind of whatever. I'm shooting I'm shooting from the hip and just like going rogue here. It's like the MCAT itself. Like I tell my students, like the MCAT is not, especially if we get like a bad score back or something like that. It's not indicative of like a student's intelligence. It's not a good predictor of, success in med school. It's like, how well can you play the game and take the MCAT, right? I don't think that's like a super big secret for a lot of people. And when it comes to plateauing, it's kind of the same thing. Like that's not an indicator that like you have hit your ceiling. It's not that you've capped with your intelligence or like what you're capable of. It's the way you've been studying has capped essentially. Like now we need to start mixing it up, right? Have you just been like essentially learning your content, reviewing modules that Blueprint has that are fantastic ways to learn your content? It breaks up 3-hour lectures into 10-minute little videos, and it's very cool. Anyway, so there's our plug for our modules. Yeah, if you've just been doing modules and reading textbooks and stuff, it's time to mix it up, right? Do some Q banks, do some applied practice. You've been doing a lot of applied practice and doing discrete after discrete after discrete. Maybe we need to practice passages and hit figures more, right? So that's the big thing when it comes to the plateau is don't let that psych you out and feel like, okay, this is the most that I can achieve, period, yada, yada, yada. It's just now we need to try something else out and come at it from a different angle, really.
Yeah. Okay.
So that would be like month after like month 2 to 4, anytime in there is when that can happen.
Okay. Let's talk about what the definition of a plateau is. Because I had a student yesterday who posted on Facebook who said, hey, I have like from diagnostic to blueprint full length 5, a 496, a 501, a 498, a 500, a 499, and then double AMC scale or unscaled test and double AMC full length 1, a 496 and a 498. To me, that's not a plateau. Yep. To me, that student hasn't figured out anything about the MCAT yet. Not to say they won't, but they just haven't figured out the test yet.
Yeah, that one's interesting because it is bouncing up and down from like 5 points, right? Like, and there's kind of a gap and a variation. Normally, like a plateau, I'll see some of my students, and if it's like we start pretty low with our diagnostic, right? And usually that's just because that's before we do any kind of prep, any kind of studying. Of course, we're going to do poorly. That's the point of the diagnostic, is kind of be like, hey, this is what it would be like right now. Let's use this as a baseline and improve. So yeah, if you're bouncing all over the place like that, normally I would say that there's something else that's going on here. If we're sub 500, my first inkling is like, hey, it's content, right? Like we're not super strong on our content, and that kind of makes sense because every MCAT tests different content, and it seems like the student is getting lucky on some of them and not getting lucky on the other ones, right? Getting unlucky, if you will. So that's normally what I would say there. Once you're above 500, then it's less like the content you don't know, and there's just things that like don't make sense, and it's all the other things that go into the MCAT, all of the skill-based things, the critical thinking aspect of it, et cetera, et cetera. So for that in particular student, I would say like, hey, this seems like we've got some big swings going from like, mid 490s to breaking 500, which is awesome. That's an achievement for a lot of us. It's like, yes, we're above 500. Great. But then we drop back down. My first thing would just be like, hey, is it the content? Like, are we getting really unlucky with like chunks of content back there? So that's what I would say for that student. Yeah. For another student, for instance, actually, I was dealing with this with one of my students earlier this week. It is 100%, ignore the dogs in the background, sorry. It is 100%, a plateau would be like, we've got mid 490s, we finally break 500, we're at 503, and like we've got these great upward trends, but then we literally just go like 503, 504, 503, 505 maybe, and we're just like staying right there. That can be really, really stressful when we kind of like, our upward trend stops and we just kind of start to plateau out, right? Like that is the dreaded score plateau. And that can be really, really stressful for a lot of students, right? It's like, especially because at this point, we're probably 3-4 full lengths in it. We're probably past the halfway mark and like test day is coming up. And now we're like, oh, great, I'm done growing. Like, this is it. I can't get any better than that. So yeah, that can be a really, really stressful moment for students.
Okay. All right. Let's talk like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks out. Getting down to crunch time.
Yeah, and this is where trusting in the process, what I was talking about in the beginning, that's where this comes back into play, right? Because a lot of the times, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again to a lot of my students, the end of our prep journey typically looks like, I mean, there's some falling scattered throughout the whole thing. We got like, several months of it. But then at the end, we really encourage people to pivot completely to AMC materials, which you get included for free anytime you enroll with Blueprint in any of our courses. Haha. But yeah, we say switch over to all your AMC materials at the very end of your prep. And the last like 4 or 5 weeks are literally a full length a week. Like you take a full length on Saturday, review it on Sunday, Monday through Thursday. It's guided from whatever your weaknesses were on that previous exam. You review it and then rinse and repeat the next Saturday, right? A lot of gains happen at that last month, like a lot of gains, because like you are essentially a test taking machine. And like I've seen students in the very last month of their prep jump up like 5, 10, 15 points in just like 4 weeks, right? And usually the only way that happens is if you spend 4 or 5 months before like laying the groundwork for this, so that like once you finally start grinding full lengths, you actually know what the heck you're reading, you know how to handle it, you like are able to actually like, you know, essentially rock the MCAT as opposed to just diving in immediately. So
yeah. But to clarify, it's not just taking the tests, right?
Oh, no. It's taking and then reviewing. Like the review is taking the exam is just it's the step that you have to do in order to let you review it.
It's like the French fry so you can eat the ketchup.
Oh yeah. No. It's just an edible, like every McNugget is just an edible spoon. That's all that it is. So yeah, no, you're 100% right. And like the issue, and like that's awesome that students have these huge gains at the very end, right? The problem is that it's super scary because a lot of the times we hit a plateau or we see like not minimal, but not the huge jumps in score that we want up until this point. And then now we're 4 weeks out from test day and your tutor is going like, don't worry, like I still think you're going to hit your goal score. Trust in the process. Like you've got 4 more weeks and you're going to see good score increases over the next 4 weeks. And they're sitting there going like, if you say so, man, like, and they're freaking out. So that I think is kind of the hardest part of this whole process is like trusting in yourself that if you do lay like the groundwork and foundation, then you can just like springboard at the very end. And a lot of people see growth.
Yeah. Okay.
Just stressful, man.
Stressful. The last week, where should a student be headspace wise?
Okay, last week. Last week is actually kind of interesting. I do some psychological manipulation with my students. Let me tell you what. The last week is all about the students. It's all about y'all who are listening to this, right? So treat yourself, right? Just full stop, period. Be nice to yourself. And like what that looks like in an MCAT prep perspective is it's kind of counterintuitive, but a lot of the times, unless there's a specific need that I need to address with a student, the end of their prep, so like the very last week, instead of going, all right, what am I weakest in? What am I the worst in? Oh God, I need to fill in my content gaps and prep and I'm stressed. I tell my students to completely switch gears. And for the last like 4, 5, 6 days, just review their strengths. So they've probably for the past 4 weeks been doing a full length, reviewing it, covering their weaknesses, rinse and repeat, right? Can be kind of demoralizing if you're doing nothing but focusing on your weaknesses and like the things that you're getting wrong, or how were we saying earlier, the things that we can learn from.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually I recommend like, hey, switch to your strengths. A, because you probably haven't reviewed them in quite a while, right? Because we've been focusing on weaknesses. And like the worst thing in the world would be the things that, you know, we should be good at and we just like miss them because we haven't reviewed it in like 2-3 weeks. So review your strengths because it's probably been a while. Also, it's just like a nice little like morale and confidence booster. And like confidence is king on the MCAT. Like I cannot tell you how important it is to walk into that test center, even if you don't feel like you're 100% prepared, because nobody's going to feel like they're 100% prepared.
Yeah,
nobody
never.
does. But like walking in there knowing like I put in the work and like, yeah, I'm going to rock this test and I'm going to beat the crap out of it. I'm going to take the test. It's not going to take me. Right. That's the most important thing. And like a lot of the times you walk out of there not feeling super confident, but like the important thing is to walk in there confident. Yeah. And honestly, I think that it's like an inverse relationship. The less confident you are leaving, the better your score is. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. Every time that I literally walked out of my testing center and thought that I bombed it completely, and then lo and behold, 99th percentile. So like, yeah, it just goes to show like trust in the process, even if you're like, like go through it. Try not to freak out too much, and like, yeah, you see how it goes.
Yeah,
have fun with it.
Have fun. And then what about the headspace after? I think everyone talks about the headspace leading up to the MCAT. There are a lot of emotions. We need to define. We have like postpartum depression. We have a definition after giving birth. We need a post MCAT definition for the emotions that go on. Should I keep studying? Did I bomb it? in the middle of it? Should I avoid it? Should I avoided it after? How should a student deal with all of those emotions, and should they bottle them up and go, it's okay, but I'm not going to think about it for a month until I get my score back? Or should they go, oh yeah, I don't think I did very well, so I'm going to keep studying and go register for another test?
Yeah. Man, good questions, Ryan. So honestly, when it comes to post-MCAT depression, PMD, it is absolutely a real thing. And I warn almost all of my students about it. In fact, my last piece of homework for most of my tutoring students is
I want to see a commercial for it. Like, are you suffering from PMD?
Do you no longer find joy in the things that you used to like?
not to joke about mental health, but I think that'd be pretty funny.
Oh no, but it's super real. It's super real. I mean, honestly, even like somebody who kind of like, as an individually in my personal life, like kind of struggle with that kind of stuff, right? So like if you're prone to it, you're even more susceptible. But even people who like have never had any issues with depression or anything like that in their entire life, like post MCAT depression is super real.
Yeah.
Like I told you, like I walked out of my MCAT feeling like I literally bombed it. Like I thought that I was a 485, like straight up. And like I did not come out of my bedroom for about 3 days other than to like go to the kitchen and use the restroom. And then I went right back to the bedroom.
Yeah.
And honestly, it took like 3 days for my friends to go like, okay, man, enough of this. And they'd like rip me out of my room and like force me to go do something. So that honestly is my last piece of homework for my tutoring students that I say is like, okay, cool. Last thing I want you to do is before your MCAT, make plans with friends or family the immediate few days afterwards. Like whatever it is, go see a movie with your friends, go to the park, like whatever, right? So that's like the first thing, because even if you're in the 99th percentile, you're going to walk out of there feeling like you got beat up. Okay. So distract yourself for sure. To answer your question about like, what should I do? Should I keep studying? Should I not think about it and bottle it up inside, et cetera, et cetera? That one kind of, it varies, right? Because like, it's not a fun thing to think about, but like inevitably some students are going to have to retake, right? Like it's part of the game. Sometimes some of us do, some of us don't. It's really hard to tell just walking out of your MCAT if you're going to be happy with your score. Like I said, nobody is really super stoked when they leave. And anecdotally, the worst thing is like a lot of us that feel really confident when we walk out, like that's when we're kind of disappointed. And then a lot of us that are like, oh man, I did terribly, like we're pleasantly surprised, right? So it's all over the place.
Yeah.
I would say honestly, the best advice for like, should I out of sight, out of mind, and I'll think about my score when it comes in the mail, or like, should I hit the ground like and just keep prepping? It's check in with yourself and like you're honestly, this is going to sound almost cliche, but check in with your mental well-being and like, can you handle it? Like if you need a break, which is totally understandable, this is for the most part one of the most stressful things in our academic careers to this point. It's the worst thing in the world yet so far.
Thanks, Homer.
But honestly, check in with yourself. Like, can I do can I immediately hit the ground and just keep prepping because I think I'm gonna have to retake? Or even if I do think I'm gonna have to retake, do I need to take a couple weeks and just like not think about it for a bit and like recharge? And that's totally fine too. If you take a month off while you're waiting for your score, it's not like the 4 months of prep that you did previously just vanish. Like you still have it. Sure, there might be some cobwebs that you need to brush off and like do some practice on, but it's absolutely okay to take a couple of weeks in order to essentially recover from the MCAT.
Yeah. No, it's true. How much in the Blueprint MCAT online course, live online course, is this kind of mindset and thought process talked about?
Oh, all over the place, honestly. So one of the cool things, oh man, hold on a second. I let me just switch on my Blueprint mode. And I promise I'm not a shill. Like I totally work for Blueprint, but like I genuinely do enjoy the course that we have, right? And we have like these not just like content modules, but like strategy modules that talk about the way to think about things and the way to approach stuff and like where you should be at in your headspace and stuff. So yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch of stuff in there. And honestly, that's also one of the things that I love about being like a live online instructor is, it's me and 25, 30 students hanging out, and I'm with them for 16 weeks of their entire journey, like 4 months, essentially, barring any holidays where we skip a week or something like that. But yeah, it's essentially 4 months of the prep, and like there's peaks and valleys, and like I'm right there with them, and my co-teacher is right there with them, and we can basically just go like, all right, y'all. So your homework from last week to this week was, your first AAMC full length. Like, how did that go? And, some people are celebrating, but some people aren't. And like, you could just be there for your students. So that's really nice too about being just in a live cohort with other people that are going through the same thing as you. Like, I think that's really, really important. I mean, Blueprint in general thinks that's really important. All of our live online classes, like the students get enrolled in like a Discord channel so that we can kind of have like study buddies and partners. Cause for the most part, like I would say the majority of my students, unless, you're coming from a family of doctors and stuff like that, like we're kind of, I don't know. There's not a lot of people in our personal lives that like know what it's like to go through this process.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was the only science major in my fraternity when I was in college. So I was sitting there teaching OChem to a bunch of business comm boys, So like it's kind of not alienating, but like it can be kind of isolating unless you have like a good support group and stuff like that. So friends, family,
we have found the same thing with Application Academy. Just that group environment is just huge.
It's so good, not just for like honestly for the outcomes, right? Because you get to brainstorm and like you just put everything in a pot and like just the best ideas boiled to the surface, but also for your mental health and just having someone to vent to is so good.